Hello everyone and welcome back to another video recording of the Waffling Taylors. We are being blinded by all of my screens here. I do apologize everyone. I'm not looking at the camera. This is the worst thing that someone who's ever hosting something could do.
All of your screens, I've got one.
Absolutely. This is another video interview that we are running with Stephen Kent. Stephen, how the devil are you? Are you well?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. It's the end of the week for me, so I'm looking forward to the weekend. It's also, here in the UK, it's what's known as Bonfire Night, so there's loads of people here setting off all sorts of different fireworks and lighting fires everywhere, so it's they may come through on the recording, I have no idea.
Yeah,
so if you hear fireworks, that's what that is, right?
I'm sat in my house with the heating on because it's a bit nippy, it's a bit cold.
It's a bit nippy.
Just turned it on, got a thick jumper on. So I would have put, I've got a really thick fleece on, but the problem is when I wear it, you see about this much of my face because it's all fleece. And I decided against it because you just see like...
You're doing the Kenny look.
Turn into Kenny from
yeah, I turned into Kenny and I'd rather not because I'd end up having Jay yelling swear words at me. So I decided against it.
I mean, why break the habit of a lifetime? Anyway.
Fair enough.
But yes, so this is a second interview that has been partially arranged by our friends over at the Zoom platform, including our friend Jordan. So thank you very much, Jordan. And we've previously had a conversation with Stephen before. The first part of our conversation was all about the books, because it's now a book series. There's Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Ultimate Guide to Video Game History, or something to that effect. I'm pretty sure that is the title, right? Because I know that there was some contention about he was originally going to be called something else.
Ultimate History of Video Games is what it ended up as. It was originally the first quarter.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right, yes. Yes. So there's a little sneak peek for people who haven't watched or listened to the first half. Please go ahead and check that out because you'll hear us talk about the ultimate history of video games and how and why it was going to be called the first quarter, but why it was changed and why that name I think fits a little better. Because I believe you'd said, Stephen, last time, as soon as you name something the ultimate anything, you're setting yourself up for failure. Really, you haven't failed, but you are setting yourself up for failure. Because anybody then comes along and says, hey, you didn't talk about this one event that happened on a Saturday afternoon that has vaguely no bearing on anything ever, but you said it was ultimate, so why didn't you include it, right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
One of the...
So, yeah.
If I can cut in for just a second, one of the big complaints was that I didn't in the first book have... I think I had one mention of Lara Croft in the entire first book. I'd like to compound that error by saying that I actually consider the first Tomb Raiders to be among the most overly hyped games, overrated games in recent video game history.
Controversial.
I know. Now you'll excuse me while I pull my boot out of my mouth.
I can see where you're coming from with the second game. The advertising for it did kind of go over the top, so I can kind of see what you mean by the second one. It
leaned very heavily into the sex appeal side of things, didn't it? And it got that to me is very. I don't want to. That's not the video games that I like, right? I want to be entertained by a video game, not necessarily rely on the slightly sleazy aspect of, look, here are some CGI boobs. I'm like, I don't want to see that.
It wasn't just that. I remember with the first... Sorry, I'm Shanghaiing you guys. I apologize.
It's fine.
But
no, it's fine.
I remember with the first one, you started out and you're, walking through this valley, and there are raptors, and that was pretty cool. And then you look up and there's a rope bridge and it's broken, and you're wondering... what could have broken that? And of course, a moment later, there's a huge Tyrannosaurus Rex. And that was all really cool. But then 5 minutes later, you're supposed to jump across the ravine and you have to hit the one pixel that'll save you. And that just never appealed to me. That kind of, hit the one pixel or you're dead.
Yeah, it's I will say from personal experience, it's even worse if you play it on a mouse and keyboard, or in my case, a keyboard. It's you end up juggling a lot of different actions, forgetting where your fingers are. And because I spent that much time playing it, I was sat there gradually going cold, so I couldn't feel my feet, and then my fingers were going cold, and I could barely feel them. I couldn't see the keyboard, because I was trying to prevent myself from being gobbled up by the bleeding T-Rex. So it got to a point where I'm sat there, and I'm doing that, turning into a T-Rex, trying to play the bloody game. I can't feel my fingers, because I spent hours just trying to jump over the ravine. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah.
You're telling us that you suffer for your entertainment. Is that what you're saying?
I suffered to try and continue, and it backfired.
But you were able to do it eventually, with the keyboard.
Yeah. I ended up backflipping and getting it. I remember that one specifically because it's a ravine that goes into a waterfall, and I couldn't hit it straight on. And I just thought, what happened if I just backflip it? So I turned around, backflipped, and managed to land it. So the moral of that story is if I can't hit a jump, just don't look and jump. It just seems to work. Lara's backflip is more powerful than a forward jumping ability. Who knew?
Well, and so you were doing it with a keyboard. I had the luxury of a Dreamcast controller in my hand.
See, that's something that I guess people who are playing games for enjoyment don't really think about too much, is that if you are in the games journalism arena, especially I think now with the press embargoes being so short, and especially with things going online mostly, you have maybe 24 hours to not only play the title enough that you can collect enough information to form your opinions and write about it in a very clear way, but also then to write about it and then to pass it to the editor and all of the other people that are between you and it being published, and then it being published.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine, especially if you get stuck on a section like that, what are you supposed to do? Right? Are you supposed to put in a cheat to get past it? I don't know what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I've got my tend to do tangent. I've got a story about a Tomb Raider game. I was playing, I think it was Tomb Raider Chronicles. It was one of them, and there was a section where there was a boss fight with I think it was a giant statue, multiple arm statue. I seem to remember something like that, and I couldn't get by it. I was trying, getting really frustrated, couldn't get by it. Then a friend came round, and we had a tipple or two too many, and I went back to the game the next day. Not only did I beat the boss battle, but I progressed 4 levels. And I honestly don't know how. Mm-hmm. So, with Tomb Raider Chronicles, unlike the first one, the moral of that story is if I can't beat a level, just get drunk. And it happens. So, I still don't know how I did it. No idea. Worked for me, though.
I mean, I'm not sure that's a healthy thing to do for the entirety of your life, but okay, if it works for you,
it's just that Tomb Raider game. It's nothing else. It just works with the Tomb Raider game.
Okay, so Stephen, we've talked a little bit about video games so far. I was wondering, for the folks who maybe haven't seen part 1, haven't heard part 1, could you give us a quick, really brief sort of introduction to the ultimate history of video gaming and a little bit about your career? Is that okay?
Sure. So I've been playing games since the very beginning. I mean, before there were video games, there were electromechanical games. That's my alarm telling me that I should get online so that I can meet with you guys. So I was already playing electromechanicals, and then in 72, I think I mentioned I was in junior high school and went to bowling and PE and saw Pong and have been hooked ever since. Started covering games in 93. In 95, I started writing Ultimate History. Only back then it was the first quarter. And went all the way back to Abraham Lincoln and then traced through pinball and how pinball led to arcades and then the rise of consoles. And So book 1 ends with the fall of Dreamcast, or Dreamcast is dying at the end of book 1. Sega is dying at the end of book 1, really. And then book 2 picks up right after that. Book 2 is, just came out in August, and it goes through PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3.
Excellent. I have to say it, and I said this last time, and for the people who are watching this, there's been about a month and a half between recording part 1 and part 2. It is next in my pile of books to read is volume 2, and I said that last time. But in the intervening time, a couple of family events have happened, and I've started working for a new client who are in a completely different time zone. So everything has been thrown out of the window. Not that time and dates matter anymore in the current situation that we find ourselves, but everything has been thrown out of the window for me.
I hope the family events were good ones.
What I'm hoping. Yes, they were. Thank you. Thank you for asking. But yes, so what I'm hoping for is there's this wonderful, I want to say it's Icelandic. There's this wonderful Icelandic tradition that I found out about earlier this year. And that is at the sort of end of year festival time, at the Christmas time, that kind of thing. On Christmas Eve, everyone gets a present. They get a book and it's a present. And what you're supposed to do is you get a cup of hot cocoa, you get some chocolates, you get all snuggled up somewhere, you start reading your book and drinking your cocoa, and then you fall asleep, and then the whole Santa business happens. Then you wake up and you have loads of presents to open. But I'm hoping to get volume 2 read over the Christmas period, if I can, and if I can include that Icelandic tradition, then that will be even better. Curl up with a good book, a cup of hot cocoa, and fall asleep. That sounds good to me.
So Squidge, what he's really saying is my books put him to sleep.
Yeah, that's one interpretation. It certainly won't be what I'll be doing on Christmas Eve. I'll tell you that. I have recently, because I've spent a good 2.5-3 months moving house. My old house where my old stuff used to be, I'm still going through it because there's quite a lot, and I've been working obviously and stuff. And I've rediscovered or relocated my Sony PSP. And there's a particular game on there that I love to play that I cannot get enough of, and it's Phantasy Star Portable. And I know for a fact I'm going to be playing that for the next 4 months. So on Christmas Eve, I'm going to be... It's Phantasy Star Portable. I'm going to be playing that till I probably pass out. Early hours in the morning, playing it and then keeping it plugged in while playing it, and then unplugging it and then plugging it back in with my little grip I've got for it. I know I'm just going to fall asleep playing that. Wake up with it on my face, You
see, I have to say, I think that Sony got the portable devices really, like the PSP already wasn't. How do I put it? When the Sony executives walked out on stage and said, this is an impenetrable fortress of security. Like, that's the worst thing you could say ever. Because as soon as you say something like that, someone's going to go, okay, it is now my mission to break into this thing. But I do believe, right, that my personal opinion is that the PSP and the PSP Vita were such great pieces of hardware. I genuinely believe that. I mean, what everyone else in the room thinks, I don't know. But I think that they genuinely were great pieces of hardware.
Well, can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
So,
sure.
So, I remember the day at E3 when they were both unveiled, PSP and DS. And I was by far in the minority. I thought DS was pretty cool. Everyone else was just crazy about PSP. I thought PSP was great too. And the head of, I write about it in the book, the head of Squaresoft, well, I met with him that day, and he went out to have a smoke and asked me to come with him. And he was talking with his other executives, and they were saying how wonderful PSP was, and he said DS is going to crush it. And the reason he said was because Sony doesn't realize what people want to do when they have a portable system. So, I mean, PSP, easily the best portable console maybe ever. But it suffered from the same problem that Nomad suffered from, which was people didn't want a portable console. They didn't want to play their console games on the run. They wanted portable games that you could pick up and put down, and it opened the door. Quick little Nomad story. Just I was in Japan. Did you guys ever play with a Nomad?
A friend of mine had one, so I've had some experience with it.
They were vampires. They had these little fangs, and you put your batteries in them, and they sucked them dry. I got on a plane, so I was in Tokyo with my Nomad, and I bought this tube of batteries so that I could play my game, my Nomad, all the way from Tokyo to Honolulu. And I got maybe 3 hours of out of this huge tube of batteries. Maybe 3 hours. I knew I was in trouble when I played once I got on the plane, and after we took off, it said that I needed to change batteries already.
Kind of sounds like the Game Gear to me.
Oh,
yeah, Sega
Game
was
Gear
not a
had the
big
same
respecter
problem,
of batteries.
I suppose that makes them slightly less environmentally friendly then, because obviously, if you're having to jettison a bunch of batteries every couple of hours, that's not great for the environment.
No, no. I mean, by the time of PSP, obviously there were built-in batteries now. You didn't have to worry about that. And PSP really was just this, as you say, this amazing portable entertainment center. It's just, I'm not sure that that's what people were looking for at the time. I'm not sure that it isn't what they're looking for now.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's why Sony got out of the portable devices market when the Vita. I mean, like I say, I don't think the Vita did that badly, but I think after that they kind of went, right, okay, nobody's buying these because, like you say, they don't want a big budget console gaming experience on a handheld at the moment. Right, I think perhaps that tide is slow. Perhaps I feel like it's slightly slowly turning with the Switch.
Switch definitely.
Yeah.
Well,
but it's taken a very long time.
And Vita did fairly competitively in Europe, correct? And it did actually fairly well in Japan. In the United States, it was more of a blip at best.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have so when the original PSP came out, I was working video game retail throughout my college years, and I remember I worked a midnight shift for when the PSP came out, and the store that I was working at was a really small store. It's in a small sleepy city at the time. What didn't have a lot of people living there, but there was a queue all the way out of the door because everybody wanted this brand new Sony console, right? And I don't know whether you remember, but the UMD discs that they came in were kind of like a small disc in a cartridge, almost like a mini disc, which another Sony format that didn't do so well in the United States.
PSP right? Or the Vita? Because the Vita came in really small cartridges.
Oh, sorry, yeah, the PSP.
Oh, PSP, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, sorry, the PSP. Yeah, so this is. I mean, I had already imported mine from Hong Kong at this point, right? Because I wanted one as soon as they announced it. I was like, I'm going to get this thing and leave it on version 1 of the firmware. And I left it on version 1 because then I installed all sorts of emulators and stuff. And it was great for that. Anyway, I've digressed a little bit. The story that I was trying to tell was, I felt like the instructions for the PSP weren't very clear because the amount of returns we had the next day of people who had bought the games and tried to crack open the small plastic outer the inner case around the disc and then slide the disc into the console.
Oh no!
And the big. Yeah, it's... Yeah. Whoops. But yeah, I don't think the instructions were too clear with the PSP. Or maybe it's just the people who live in that city. I don't know.
I had, when I got mine, I was determined to get a white one, which I've still got to this day. I got one, I took it home, and my first game that I got for it was Samurai Warriors. I am a massive Koei fan. Love me some Samurai Warriors. And I started playing it, and within 10 minutes, the control stick snapped. So within the first day of me getting it, I had to go all the way back to go, listen, I was playing this for 10 minutes and look at the stick, and I went, yeah, we'll exchange it for you. There's your receipt, there's a new one. Wow. So it was just snap.
That's because you were playing an arcade game. You're used to really jamming that little joystick.
I mean, the second one I had, I've still got now, so it must have just been a defunct joystick. But I was with my friend, I was playing it, and he just saw the look on my face when he just hit snap, and he went, did you just knacker the control stick? And I went, I think so. I let go of it, and the control stick where it was sat, it just went, yeah, this is gone. I've got to go back. And it was raining, so I went back. It looked like a drowned rat by the time I got there. This is bust. Got it changed, put it in the bag, wrapped it round so it didn't get bust. Get all the way home, soaking wet through. Quick towel dry. Right, let's get on with it. And it was fine after that, but it was just complete drowned rat, broken stick. I thought it was me. My original thought was, they can't be this fragile. This cannot be this fragile. It can't be. But it just went snap. Oh God. No.
So was Samurai Warrior your favorite fighting game?
Yeah, because you had, it was between Samurai Warriors and Dynasty Warriors, because Samurai Warriors was just purely jump in, kick the crap out of people, and get the story done. Dynasty Warriors was more of a stage by stage, and you had an initial XP level up your character, but then when you started a stage, you started at level 1, and the more squares you took, you gradually build up, so you had to be strategic with it. But if you leveled up overall, when you were at level 1, your stats were higher. And you had bodyguards and all sorts of stuff. I preferred Samurai Warriors because it was less thought process and more button bashing.
Okay.
Didn't have to think too much. It was just, it was a lot easier.
Okay.
That's fair enough. I mean, sometimes you just want to play a game where you get dropped into a battlefield and you're fighting lots of things. I mean... Sometimes you just feel
sometimes you
want to be dropped Dynasty into a Warrior, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you want to be dropped into a battlefield. Sometimes you want to dress up in kids' toys with a helmet on, with a guitar, smashing up zombies. I mean, the world's your oyster at that point. Just pick a game and go for it.
Yeah. You're talking about Dead Rising,
maybe.
Right? AKA totally not Dawn of the Dead, the video game.
I mean, you don't always have to play classics, do you? You just want to get in and bash something with something. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah,
that's probably revealing.
As long as you're having
that's
fun.
Revealing a bit too much about me sometimes, I think.
Maybe. Okay. So, try that again. It's a good thing this isn't going out live, isn't it? Oh my goodness. Sorry, Stephen. So we've had some questions and comments from the community around us. Some friends I reached out to, some friends of the Waffling Taylors, and we've had some community questions for you, Stephen. I was wondering whether you'd be willing to have a few of these questions sort of flung at you and see what you think.
Fling away.
Before we get to the community questions, before we get to that, can I just give a brief update? Because I remember specifically I did promise something the last time I was on.
Yes.
I got the Steve Jobs autobiography. Because I said I'd listen to it. Yep. I got the audiobook version because I don't read too well. I'm really sensitive with my eyesight, and I find it really hard to read books because of light bouncing. So I got the audiobook, and it was kind of telling when the beginning part, the guy who was narrating it said, "Some of this might be fact, some of this might not be. Take it with a pinch of salt," kind of thing. And I was sort of like, okay. Wow. I'm 4 hours in of a 22-hour audiobook, and it's absolutely true. I can't tell if a lot of it's grandiose or if it's true. You can tell where the true sections are, where it was like absolute fact, this happened, that happened. but it's separating it, and I'm finding it hard to get into. It is fascinating, do not get me wrong, but it's really hard to get into. But I am trying. I said I'd listen to it, and I'm going to. It's just really hard to get into. It's not light reading. You've got to be in the zone to read, or in my case, listen to it. But it's just I'm having a difficult time getting into it. But I am trying.
You know, it's not one of those. It's not a nail biter. It's not. You're not reading the Matrix. But there's a lot to learn. There are a lot of life lessons to learn. Steve Jobs was fascinating. It's a fascinating book, not an exciting one.
Yeah, but I will get to the end of it.
And brilliantly written. I'm just going to give Isaacson credit for that.
Absolutely. I think with someone as big as Steve Jobs, there's always going to be that element of, when you interview people, there'll always be that, really? Did that really happen? Or are you just sort of playing up because you know I'm going to put this into the book to make the person sound, maybe make them sound a little strange to the readers, or a little over the top, or whatever. And I feel like Isaacson found the right blend of, let's talk about the man and maybe include a little bit of the myth, but try to explain some of those things.
Yeah, that's very fair.
I think he's done a really good job at that. Yeah. So you're getting on with it, I guess, Wedge?
Little by little. It's taking time, but I'm getting there. It's one of those, I'm determined to do it. So it's just when I'm in the right mood for it, and the pacing of it is it's very back and forth. And there's a lot of time skips, and it's kind of hard to. I'm stuck with my classic novel or things that I read. There's usually a timeline or a passage of time that happens, instead of doing like a Tarantino bit, but back and forth. Let's join it up, and it's. I've got a feeling I'm going to end up with a giant board, with things written down and strings going to it like a conspiracy theorist. I've got a feeling it's going to end up like that, but I will get to it. I'm trying.
I think perhaps though that's the problem that you run when you're writing a biography of a person or an event or a series of events. You have this problem of, do I explain the backstory of everything all at once, or do I explain an event that happened and then maybe dissect that event by saying, okay, what you've just witnessed, now let's explain why this happened. Let's go back a little bit and explain that. And now we can move to the next stage, right? We're at the next stage. Now we'll observe what happened, and then we'll maybe explain what happened that led up to this thing. And I think it's a difficult thing for most, I feel like for most writers to do, right? And I think it's something that both, if you don't mind me saying, Stephen, both you and Isaacson are very good at, is because, in your books, you've had to say, hey, this happened, but okay, now let's move to the next thing. But we have to go back a little bit more to explain something where almost events diverge, right? So Nolan Bushnell, with all of his, I want to call them the pool parties, but they're not, where they were sitting around in the hot tubs. Okay, so they were doing that, and someone left, and they went in this direction. So we'll come back to them later in another chapter. For now, we'll stay here. Now let's go back to that pool party and watch the person who went off in that other direction. And I feel like both you and Isaacson do that very well, if you don't mind me saying so.
You're very kind. Thank you.
I mean, it's the truth. So, it's how I feel, right? It's very true. But there you go. Okay. So, Squidge, what about this first question or comment from good friend Andrew Dickinson?
Andrew Dickinson, Mr. Podcaster Man. Yes.
Mr. Andrew Dickinson, lots of podcasts.
So,
man.
word for word, this is what you said. Okay. He just put, Stephen is lovely. It's a really good start. Right. Say hi from me. So, hi from Andrew. Big wave.
Hi, Andrew.
And ask him where he thinks gaming is headed now. Is VR the next big thing? Are we headed for a console-less future with everything in cloud? End quote.
So VR is sort of the direction. I will confess that VR scares the hell out of me, because our brains physically map themselves based on the data, what we feed them. And I once published, and actually they made the world's least expensive movie based on a short story I wrote a long, long time ago. And when I say the world's least expensive movie, I'm surprised they didn't charge me for making it. But it was based on a company that would implant things into people's brains. And, so the thing is, we don't have a lot of research showing us what happens when you fool your brain too many times on too many things. It's a very visceral thing. They have that one VR demonstration where there's like a little ledge you're supposed to walk across, and then you put on the VR headset and there's a fan blowing air on you and you're on the top of a tall building. And I haven't tried it. I've talked to many people, and I don't think I've run into anybody who finished it, who could do it all, who didn't just say, no, I'm not doing this. That's powerful. I think if we do head further into the VR direction, which I think ultimately has to be the case, then you have we'll go the retinal display route, because I think the headsets are too bulky and limiting. And I think what we'll find is a lot less VR and a lot more augmented reality, AR.
Yeah.
Just my opinion. And truly a worthless opinion. So.
No, I think you're right. I think AR is already becoming a big, at least in the circles that I find myself in. Maybe it's just because it's developers playing with the technology, but augmented reality is very much a thing that you can do, and it's a great way to enhance or indeed augment the environment that you're in. In development, you could maybe have. I've seen one person who working away, and they have like the HoloLens, the Microsoft HoloLens system. They're working away, and when they receive an important email about the work that they're doing, it sort of pops up in their vision, just below their eye, like it just sort of appears here, because you've got to still put the sort of the headset on, and it will just appear just in their vision. Hey, you have this important message, rather than it just being a notification on your screen, because you can easily lose that, right? But if it's in your field of vision, you tend to react a little bit more. Oh, what's this? Oh, goodness. There's, the server's on fire or something, and people tend to react to that. But I also like the idea of using. Sorry, Squidge, I should have waited until you finished drinking.
Help! The server's on fire, and now my trousers are on fire as well.
I mean, okay, so true story. I worked for a company once who said I walked into the server room, and they said, "Whatever you do, never ever push this button." There's a gigantic red button, and I mean, if you're gonna make a button you don't want me to push, don't color it red. That's But anyway, this gigantic red button, and I said, "Well, why?" He said, "There's that much important information in this room on these servers that if the room catches fire, you hit this big red button and it sucks the air out of the room. You will die, but the information will be protected because it is that important. So don't ever push this button." And I was like, "Okay, can I leave, please? I don't want to work here anymore."
If it was me, I want to guarantee that if I hit that button, there's some sort of music playing. Like you push it, and as you go out, you can hear trombones or harps or something.
Oh, no. This is the thing. You push the button, and the door comes down straight away.
Yeah.
Like, you are sealed in that room within less than, like, a tenth of a second.
A speaker in the corner. Just blast out some music. Like Flight of the Valkyries or something as you go out. If you're going to do it properly and give, like, a power pose. Why not?
Well, so 2 comments on that. One, with augmented reality, the best lie is the lie where it's so infused with truths that you really have to go looking. That's the same with augmented reality. The other thing, though, just on your comment about, don't hit the red button, there's a comic named Garrison Keillor who says that God made a huge mistake in the Garden of Eden. He shouldn't have told Adam not to eat the apple. He should have told Adam not to eat the snake.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that'd work. As
like that.
someone who's got a VR headset, who only yesterday, it's an Oculus. I installed Resident Evil 4 VR. I only just, and I've had mine for about 9 months. It was only just yesterday that I figured out how to attach it to my head properly as a glasses wearer without it like nipping or and being too tight. So I finally figured out yesterday how to do it, and I can attest to how heavy the headset is. You get used to it after a while, but when you first start using it, it's either too loose or too tight. And true story, I have ended up at some high speed going into a wall because I didn't realise where the barrier was. I set it too much. You can set the barrier yourself. I set it too wide, and I ended up 10 and going straight into a wall. It's a bit tighter this time. Yeah, so I've done that a few times. There's a couple of scrapes on the front of it, even though it's got the safety feature of tapping it, and you can see I've gone barreling into a wall, not realising. I've also caught TV a few times. There's a couple of good wallops and dints into the TV. My own fault, but I was playing a fighting game, and I got a bit too into it. Next thing I know, I heard this crack. I'd moved the headset up, and I realised that I'd punched the TV. Not with a hand bit, but with my hand, I punched it. So there's a massive dent where I hit it because I was really going. It was a boxing game, I think. I was just going for it. Ding! Oh, okay, I'll step aside. That's because I set the barrier too wide. Not realising.
I think though that fits with what you were saying earlier, Stephen, about your brain maps the environment based on the input you give it. So another example is a friend of mine plays, oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of it. It's an Oculus game where you have to like shoot loads of zombies, and the end of the game you have to grab hold, do the sort of action hero pose of grab hold of the underside of a helicopter and be lifted off whilst just
Arizona Sunrise, is it?
Downwards, right? That's the one, Arizona Sunrise. And he says every time he plays it, because obviously what happens is you look up and you push the button to grab hold of the helicopter, and your body braces for I'm going to get pulled up off of the floor, and then it goes and you don't move. And he says every time it happens, he falls over, or he feels like he's going to be sick because his whole body is tensed, ready for that yank, right? And I think if that's going to be the future, they need to sort of maybe look into whether those kinds of those kinds of actions in the game should happen, because obviously it's going to cause people issues.
Or
right?
maybe,
and I remember
sort of change the game so instead of holding onto a helicopter, it sort of lowers a platform that you stand on, so it doesn't feel like you're being lifted up. You're just sort of looking down and you're stood on a platform.
Did you guys see Free Guy? Have you guys seen Free Guy yet?
I haven't seen it yet. It is on my list of things to see.
I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it yet, although I am going to watch it.
The first hour of Free Guy is amazing beyond belief. It goes a little long and loses its way towards the end, as is bound to do. But in a lot of ways, Free Guy was a lot more honest about what it's like to be virtual than Ready Player One. And that was interesting to me, that it was a more honest portrayal. In Free Guy, at one point... Are you guys going to forgive me? It's not the end spoiler or anything, but
no, go for it.
But at one point, Ryan Reynolds, who's an NPC, non-playable character, asks if he can kiss this playable character, and she's like, "Well, that's not really in the programming," but he's able to do it because he's an NPC. But the point is, there are so many movements. Every movement, as you guys would know, any movement that you do in a game on some level has to be programmed in. And there was such a freedom of movement in Ready Player One. There was no limit to what moves you could do. Anything you could think of, you could do, in theory, because you had this haptic suit on. but it doesn't work that way. It was nice that in Free Guy they got that right. Oh.
I like that. I do remember when I was at university, we were shown, so this was 2004 to 2008, we were shown some footage of, at the time, cutting edge. Everything is cutting edge, right, in research. The Bunny Quad's cutting edge, right? And this was cutting edge VR stuff that was happening at the University of Utah. Now, from what I remember back then when I was at uni, Utah is the place to go if you want to be in sort of graphics, at the very forefront of graphical computer graphics research. And they had the VR headsets that had full tracking throughout this room. They had the controllers, but they also had, you would step into the room and step onto a platform, and the platform was made up of 4 moving platforms, if that makes sense. You'd stand on one, and as you go to step forward, it would detect the weight shift of your foot, and another one of these platforms would quickly zip around in front of you. So then you step onto that platform. It would then drag you back to give you the feeling of movement, but actually you haven't moved anywhere, which helped with the idea of, like you were saying there, Squidge, of walking into things, right? But the problem is you need a huge open space to do that. I think maybe that's going to be the limiting factor with VR right now, is that, especially over in the UK, we don't have a lot of space. So traditionally, a family room, like a living room in a house, is, you're talking maybe 12 feet wide maximum. Then you got to get a couch in there and some furniture. And so really you've got about 6 or 7 feet of space, if that. And so I think VR, at least over here, is going to have to change a little bit in the way that it works. My understanding over in the United States is that, people tend to have larger rooms. So you have that space. And I think this was one of the problems with the Kinect when it first came out. It was very much, just because of the way it was designed, it was very much geared towards American consumers and not so much the UK or Japan, where we don't have a lot of space.
Well,
because I remember what...
No, I was just going to say Kinect had a whole treasure trove of problems, but that's another story.
Yes.
That it did.
It did. But yeah, I remember watching you, Squish, trying to play this Kinect game and you kept bumping into things because obviously you're focusing on what you're being prompted to do. And because you don't realize, there's a door there, bash, I've just hurt my shoulder again,
Yeah, after we set it up in a bigger room and sort of confiscated the room, it was me and my friend, and we were playing the Kinect Adventure thing. So it was it was a particular mini game where you're in a raft and you got to jump and move your arms to collect coins and stuff.
And duck.
And duck, yeah. And Jill remembered this story because he's still got a picture of it. I was playing with a good friend, the Bee, and before it even started, I'm in workout clothes, right? So before I even started, he slapped my hand. I have no idea why, but the thing is, he's very thin, really thin. He didn't look ill with it, but he's just a really thin guy, and I wasn't expecting it, and I picked him up like I was going to body slam him, and I started screaming like I was going to. He got freaked out. Jay, quick as a flash, took a picture, and then I put him down. And he sort of looked at me and I went, don't slap my hand again. But he's still got the picture of me holding him like a wrestler would, just going, then I put him down.
I think, though, that was one of the big problems with those early, I want to say alternative input games. I'm not sure what the actual word for it would be. Like the Nintendo Wii, the Kinect, the PlayStation Move, was because traditionally with video gaming, you're holding a controller, you're not really moving. So you can sit next to someone. There might be a little bit of friendly jostling, bit of reach over and do something with your controller, maybe try and block your vision. But there isn't very much any of this, lots of arms moving and legs moving. And so for a lot of people, it was a whole new experience of, whoops, I've just beaten you up, but I wanted to get that piece of fruit from the screen.
A lot of black eyes. Inadvertently,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So...
Yeah.
When you're talking about University of Utah, you're talking about back in the Evans and Sutherland days.
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah, that goes back a long way.
Yeah.
That's
does,
where
it
Nolan
does.
Bushnell went to school.
It was, yeah. It was. Yeah, one of my lecturers, one of my professors always said, if you're thinking of doing a postgrad, go to America, go to Utah, because that's where you want to be for computer science graphic stuff. Go to Utah. For computer science and electronic engineering, you want to be at MIT. And I was like, okay, that's wonderful, but I ain't never going to get there. So
I wonder if that's still the case. I spoke to Evans for about 30 seconds once.
Right.
I think it was Evans. It's funny because when I first started work on Ultimate History, I heard that I would go to Utah. Utah has a really interesting video game underground there. A lot of good people came out of Utah. Obviously, Nolan Bushnell for openers. And either Evans or Sutherland, somebody mentioned Evans and Sutherland to me as something to look into. And to me, it sounded like a department store. It's like, oh yeah, go shopping at Evans and not Sutherland. And it's like, well, isn't Nordstrom's good enough? Or, so I talked to, I think it was Sutherland, it might have been Evans. One of them had passed away already. And said, I was hoping to interview you. And he's like, for what? And I said, a book on the history of video games. And he said no, and that was the entire conversation. But I also went to Utah when they had the Olympics there. And I did an article called The Other Olympic Games, or The Other Utah Games, about all the game companies and all the game people who came out of Utah. The kid who discovered the Easter egg in Adventure on the Atari 2600 was a Utah kid, Clayton. Clayton. Anyways, so I went down there, and all the car combat games come out of Utah, or they used to. Motor City Mayhem came. What was that great Sony one? With Sweet Tooth, the Twisted Metal.
Oh, Heavy Metal.
Yes.
Twisted Metal, yeah.
Yeah, Twisted Metal came out of Utah. A bunch of them came out. The only one that wasn't coming out of Utah was obviously Mario Kart. Drivers are terrible in Utah. I mean, that is considered the most scary state in the country to drive in. And so because I was writing this article for MSNBC and USA Today, I just started out by interviewing the governor of Utah, Mike Leavitt. And then I put out my article, and in my article for USA Today, I commented that all the car combat games come out of Utah, which won't be a surprise to anybody who's ever driven down the I-5 corridor. I actually got a call from the governor saying he didn't appreciate that comment.
Oh my goodness! I wonder if those two facts are related, though. Like, if it is so difficult to drive there, maybe that's they get into the office and they're like, oh, if only I had a cannon on my car today. I know what I'll do. I'll make that game where I'm driving around in traffic and I have a cannon. I don't know.
Would work for me.
Maybe one of those comedy oversized, the boxing glove.
Did you ever play Cell Damage?
Yes.
I have not played
Cell Damage.
There's so many games I haven't
It's a ton
played.
of fun, that one. Just
I
insane.
liked Cell Damage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked that game.
It's
boxing glove reminded me of that reference.
That game ruins friendships, especially the couch co-op ones. That is definitely one that does it, and you end up getting an elbow in the face if you're not careful. Or at least I did. I don't know about anyone else. But...
Oh, geez. I'm wondering whether that's more to do with your friends, though. But there you go.
I don't know. He's the one who picked the friend up and was about to body slam him.
I mean, he was asking for it. He slapped me. So I'm sorry if I keep looking to the side. I keep hearing fireworks outside, and it's really distracting. Like really loud ones.
I mean, that's fine. That's fine. So we have a question from our friend unaffiliated Jay-Z. We call him that because
unofficial?
we don't want people to think that it is. Yeah, we don't want people to think that it's Jay-Z the rapper, right? So he's unaffiliated.
And he loves his unaffiliated Jaffa cakes as well.
That's it. So what he says is, which is the best console ever, and why was it the SNES?
I know a lot of people who feel that way about the SNES. A lot of people. And Super NES was a good console. I will confess that for me, the 16-bit generation couldn't die quickly enough. Because I felt that a lot of the 16-bit generation was just much prettier versions of 8-bit games.
Yeah.
With the exception of fighting games. I mean, even, now looking back, I think the first game that would come to mind when people think about the 16-bit generation, a lot of people are going to jump right onto Donkey Kong Country. But it was a side-scroller. It was a very, you could have done it. It wouldn't have looked as good, but you could have done that game on an NES cartridge. Whereas so much that came out in the 32-bit, 64-bit generation really was new. So I think that the Super NES was a fabulous console. I really do. Head and shoulders above its competitors. And when I say its competitors, here I am sticking my foot in my mouth again. But really, truly, I group the 3DO and the Jaguar more with the Super NES than I do with the Saturn and the PlayStation and the 60 and the N64.
Sure.
SNES was a great console. I think that it could have been better supported with a wider variety of games, but at the time people really wanted fighting games and they still wanted side scrollers. So if I'm going to pick to me, when you say best console, I want the one that was the most exciting. And I think we may have talked about this last time, that I would take the time period of the NES and the time period of the PlayStation 2, because with those two consoles, every weekend, if you went to the mall, there was something new and unexpected. And new kinds of gameplay all the time. I don't think we've had anything like that. They had great fighting games. Really, 3D was realized, I think, more during the PlayStation 2 than during the PlayStation. For me, one of the greatest, my favorite PlayStation game is still Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And, just a phenomenal game, but you could have played it on an NES. It wouldn't have looked as good, it wouldn't have sounded as good, but the gameplay was identical. That's what made it so wonderful. And games like Maximo, which attempted to take that into 3D, didn't do as well. But then all of a sudden you get the PlayStation 2, and you've got Guitar Hero. You've got really beautifully realized 3D. You've got, they just did everything. There was so much creativity and so many different kinds of games came on. And you couldn't wait for E3, to see what everything. And it was the same thing with the NES, which could have done only what Atari 2600 had done, but instead gave you everything, almost everything that we still play. So
definitely the birthplace of some very endearing and long-lasting types of games. So like Metroid, Mario.
I take genres.
There's a lot of them that started on the NES, and some people don't even realize it. it was, especially for me. I remember when I think it was either Prime or Fusion, Metroid, the GameCube one, the one that was first person.
Prime.
That's one, Prime. When Metroid Prime first came out, I confused the hell out of my friends because one of them said, "Have you played Metroid?" And I said, "No, I think my NES is in the attic." And they went, "What?" I went, "Metroid. My NES is in the attic." And he went, "What?" And I said, "You asked about Metroid." "No, the new one on GameCube." "So you're not on about the NES one?" "No." I said, "Well, ask me the right question next time." "It's on the NES. It's in the attic. I don't have access to it." "You what?"
Oh, that was a beautiful game. Metroid Prime. That was one of the games when an amazing game comes out, and it didn't happen very often. I would get so hooked that finally my wife would basically have to ban me from playing it. Metroid Prime.
No controller for you. Give me that controller.
Yeah.
I like it. I think I feel like I agree with you, Stephen, in that at the point when the NES came out, it was a case of not what should we do, but what can we do, right? And it was more playing with the technology. What can we actually do with this thing? I mean, you can see that now with people going back and making their I don't think a homebrew is the right word, but making their own homebrew games for the NES, for the SNES, for the Master System, the Genesis,
the Dreamcast. Still going for the Dreamcast as well.
There is still, give those people those limitations, and guess what? Okay, right, we have to fit all of this data onto 28 kilobits or something, and I think with those restrictions in place, you get greater creativity.
Well, and it gave us one of the great minds of that period is your countryman, Chris Stamper, who took technology people thought they knew what it could do, and showed the world that it could do 10 times more. I think had it not been for Chris Stamper, the NES might not have been as well received or as brilliant as it was. And if it weren't for the NES, I don't know that we'd know what an incredible genius Chris Stamper was. Have you guys met him?
I feel similarly. Oh, sorry. No, we haven't.
Unfortunately,
I'm
no.
gonna have to see if I can track him down and see if I can get him on the show. I think that would be an interesting conversation.
Worth a drive to Twycross, I'll tell you. He is a consummate gentleman.
Okay. I'll have to see if I can track him down and see if we can get him on the show. What do you think,
That's
Squidge?
worth a shot, isn't it?
You guys stand a good chance. I think he'll be fascinated that you guys have such a good handle on the technical side of things.
Oh, thank you very much.
We try.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I think. I think I tend to agree with you. There's something you said there about taking the hardware and showing people what it can do, and I feel like John Carmack did that similarly with Doom for the PC, right? Because there's this wonderful story. I don't know whether you've ever read it, but there's this wonderful story in Masters of Doom,
which I've read,
about how.
Sweet.
So one particular story. I think he's frozen.
Give it a second. Yeah, I think he might be frozen. We'll come back in a second, I think. Hopefully.
My question gave him a headache.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Looks like I disconnected. But the way this works, I would have still kept talking. So, future Jamie, cut all that bit out. But John Carmack has a similar ability, I think, with PC hardware, in that there's this wonderful story in Masters of Doom. I'm just redoing this bit so I can get the run up to what I was saying. I'll sort of cut it in. Wonderful story in Masters of Doom where the two Johns ended up buying a NES and put Super Mario Bros. 3 into it, and whilst Romero was playing it, Carmack was recreating it on screen. And at a time when Nintendo said, we're not going to license our console games to PC video game manufacturers because what we're doing can't be done on the PC. And there's this, Carmack and Romero basically recreated the first level of Super Mario Bros. 3 in a weekend, sent it to Nintendo of America and said, we'd like to license this. Could we please license this and release Super Mario Bros. On the PC? And they got a very, very nicely worded cease and desist from Nintendo of America. Stop ripping off our content. And I'm like,
I mean, there is a rare breed of person who can do that, but there's also a rare breed. It goes hand in hand with another rare breed of person where you tell them something can't be done, and they will go all out to prove you wrong. Either prove you wrong or just say, I've got the makings of doing it. You said it couldn't be, and I'm going to do it. Yeah.
When I was in college, Home Box Office came out with they hired the company that did the encryption for NASA to do an encryption for them. And when it was done, they announced that we hired this company. We are now, no one can touch us. And you don't challenge those people, because those people will show you what you're about. It took them almost a weekend to crack that unbreakable code.
A weekend?
Yeah. Oh, and we've lost Jamie again. The other thing I was going to say while Jamie's coming back is just that with Chris Stamper, he went to a known system and said, hey guys, here are the things you don't know are in here. With John Carmack, it was the reverse. He got so good and so respected that people would come to him. With John Carmack, they'd come to him and they'd say, what do you want us to put in next?
Yeah, you give us a shopping list and we'll get you it, yeah.
Yeah. Carmack is... I mean... I think history will show that the Unreal engines were better than the Doom engines. But I also think that, Carmack put himself out first. Carmack would come out with it, and then Sweeney would look at what Carmack had done and find ways to improve on it. But, so Carmack is the pioneer and Sweeney is the innovator.
Yeah.
I personally, I think Sweeney's great. I have a little more respect for the pioneer.
Sure. One of the things that I do with junior developers, when I take a junior developer under my wing and want to mentor them, I'll tell them, it's a meme. I know it's a meme, but it's a meme for a reason. Go study the Doom source code, right? Because it is so well written. That is the reason why it keeps getting ported to everything. Because all you need to do is hook into the visual side of it, the control side of it, and the sound side of it. So for people who don't know, video game engines are usually written in such a way that everything is modularized. So the input can be handled by some piece of code over here. The screenwriting can be handled by writing to the screen, drawing on the screen can be handled by some code over here. Audio production can be done by this bit. Physics is over there. Your game rules and sort of logic can be over here. And that's how you would have to write a game when you were first making one. But most of the time, because it was never going to be cross-platform, a SNES game would be written very specifically for the SNES hardware and wouldn't be cross-compatible. There would be no way to convert a SNES game to the Genesis, for instance, without actually going and recreating it frame by frame, still by still, and rebuilding it completely. But what Carmack did for the Doom source engine was he split everything out, because he knew that he would have to run it on DOS, on Windows, and on Mac OS. And those three systems had completely different systems for drawing on the screen and making sounds happen and taking input from the user. So he separated all of those concerns out. We talk about separating concerns in computer programming. And he separated all of those out. They built every single piece of it completely separately and had almost like a messaging system between them. And that is why it's always... You see it all the time, right? Oh, wow, I've got Doom running on an oscilloscope. Oh, wow, we've got Doom. There was one a few months back. We have Doom running on a pregnancy test.
I saw that one. That was amazing.
Because it is entirely possible to do that because the code is written so well. It's got nothing to do with, oh, it's an old game so it can run on... No, it's because the code is written so well.
Yeah. Plus,
that's my little tirade about...
Who doesn't like blasting aliens on Mars, you know?
He's
on a pregnancy test.
An interesting guy. When you meet Carmack, he's an interesting guy. He's very, very, very smart, but he's very patient, and he's interesting to talk to. You know, when I did the book on the making of Doom 3, I spent a couple of weeks over in the Doom offices interviewing everybody, and John Carmack made himself incredibly available for interviews. So. Nice guy.
He seems it. The developers that I've spoken to that have met him have said he has opinions on certain things to do with development, but if you can convince him otherwise, he'll go, okay, we'll do it like that from now on then. Yeah. Because if that's the way we do it, then that's the way we do it, right? He doesn't seem very, from what I've been told, very... evangelical about you must do it this way, you must do it that way. If you can come up with a better way of doing it and you have a good reason for it, go, let's do it that way.
So when I was in Dallas interviewing them and writing that book, there's a story about John Carmack doing exactly what you're talking about, which is that his wife, Anna Kang, had gone and bought a bunch of furniture for their house. So he's home alone. I don't think he even knew the furniture was coming. There's a knock on the door. And he opens the door, and the delivery guy says, "Are you Mr. Kang?" And he said, "Close enough," and opened the doors and let them come in.
I like that.
I mean, it's a good philosophy to have, because if you're not open-minded, especially... I'm not a programmer, but I can imagine that if you're not open-minded when it comes to programming, and you're not... Your way of thinking isn't malleable enough to see things from a different angle, you'll never learn, which means you'll never evolve and you'll be left in the dust. So he's got the right way of doing it, which is, okay, if I'm wrong and this is a better way of doing it, let's adopt that.
Well, so the thing about a John Carmack or a Mark Cerny or a Tim Sweeney, and probably to a Chris Stamper as well, is that I think they see everything from every angle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's also important to know that there is no one solution which works for everything, because a lot of we're veering off into talking about software development here, but there is no one solution. There's no one way to do absolutely to solve every single problem. If you want to solve crossword puzzles, then the solution you will come up with for a piece of software which solves crossword puzzles will be different to software which solves Sudoku puzzles, which then will be different to solving word search or word scramble puzzles, and making software which draws alien figures on screen that you can zap with a rifle will be different to the code which solves the problem of how do we run from left to right collecting all the bananas, right? Yeah. And accepting that there is no one way to solve the problem is, I think, probably the best way to do it. Sorry, we've veered off.
Can I say one last thing? I'm sorry, but it brought up actually a life lesson I learned from John Carmack. He didn't mean it as a life lesson, but we were talking about, this was, I don't know what year Doom 3 came out, but in that era, there were new graphics cards coming out every year, and I forget the name of the company that did Comanche, and I forget they did helicopter simulations and things, but what he talked about was, he said that when it comes to graphics, people are always coming up with elegant solutions. Like voxels. Do you remember voxels? And what he said was, But in the end, it's always raw power that makes the difference.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, that's applicable to graphics, but it's applicable to a lot of things in life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's slightly related, but again, when I'm mentoring young developers, I say to them, your boss, whoever your boss is, doesn't care how you solve the problem, just that you solved the problem, right? It doesn't matter if you use this language or that language or this framework or this tool, or if you quite literally copied the code from somewhere else, because all that matters is, from your boss's point of view, when I push the button, it gives me money, or I push the button and it gives me, whatever. It doesn't matter. For instance, let's say if you're building the software which runs a pacemaker, it doesn't matter how you've done it, as long as it keeps someone's heart pumping, right? And that is the most important thing. And I think you're absolutely right there, Stephen. When it comes to solving the problem, if you just need more power, then give me more power and we'll solve the problem, rather than wasting time coming up with a wonderfully elegant solution.
Well, I am absolutely right, but John Carmack was absolutely right before me. In this case, I'm not going to take credit for it.
I mean, you can take credit for it because you told me, so that means you created it, right?
Remember, he also has, along with everything else, John Carmack has a black belt in judo. I think I'll stay on his good side.
Yes. Absolutely.
Stay on his good side or you end up on your backside. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. In that case, let's just continue with the idea that he came up with it then. That's fine. I don't want to get beaten up by anybody.
Right, it's time for another question, right?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay,
so can you take the one from Glanks?
Yeah, Glanks. Okay, so I can resonate with this because I'm a bit of a retro collector myself. I like to collect stuff from my childhood that I remember playing and play it again, hook it up to a big TV and sit there and just have the memories flooding back. So this is a bit of a three-pronged one. It's not really... Anyway, so he asked, would be interesting to know your take on modern titles, on what modern titles will be historically relevant in 20 years. So prime example, what does a top 10 list of games look like in 20 to 30 years? And do you think people will be clamouring for the cartridge copy of Breath of the Wild in like 20-odd years' time?
Boy, that's
I know there's a lot
question,
there.
though.
But,
I think Breath of the Wild is a great game. I think that people will be clamoring for that title in 20 years, but not because of the game itself, also because it's part of the entire Zelda franchise. If I were to look at the last five or maybe 8 years, and these are games I certainly have not played all the way through. I think that Ghost of Tsushima and The Witcher 3 probably will be two games that people will be looking at a long time from now and referring to them as masterpieces. I think there are a lot of indie games that, and I haven't spent much time on indie games, but I think there are a lot of indie games that people will be looking at in the future that I can't comment on that are probably very, very brilliant. Flappy Bird, probably not among them. Although I love Flappy Bird for what the guy did was amazing to me.
I wonder if, just to cut in there, Steve, if you don't mind, I wonder if with the indie games and the AAA titles, they fit with that innovator pioneer metaphor you used earlier on. With the indie games, will innovate on something and create some kind of control scheme or some kind of game mechanic, and then the pioneers will come along and go, let's build a AAA title which has that in it, but it is not. It's not the killer feature of that app, right? It'll have a Flappy Bird like a level, but the rest of the game is, I don't know, FIFA or something, right? Really bad example, but those are the two titles that came to my mind.
I've got a bit of a story of Witcher 3, if you don't mind me interjecting. A friend of mine, I got Witcher 3, haven't played the previous ones, right? Heard a lot about Witcher 3, and I thought this is going to be a rolling, massive RPG. You got a horse. I heard all the things about the horse just popping up everywhere, like on top of buildings and stuff. I wanted to experience it myself, right? And a friend of mine, a friend of the show, Chief Problems, he said, there is an awesome quest right near the beginning, and what you've got to do is you've got to get a frying pan for this woman. So me being me, I thought, I've got to do this. I've got to find this. I looked everywhere, right? And I found this quest, and it's you go into a house. It's not really a spoiler at this point. You go into this house, you get this frying pan. You realise that the person who broke in had been murdered, right? And you get this frying pan for this little old woman, and that's essentially it, right? You go outside and you go, you don't want to go in there yet. Here's your frying pan, and she makes a massive thing about, I've got to give you something. No, please, I really don't need anything. Just shush, I've got to get you something. And she gives you a loaf of bread, right? To annoy my friend after doing that, I said, right, I've completed it now. I didn't realise how short Witcher 3 was. You can't have completed it. I've gone back on it and I've got like halfway through, I think. But just to annoy him, I went, yeah, I've completed it. I've got her a frying pan. The job done. Next game. You can't do that. I have. I got a loaf of bread. Game over. Credits. Everything. Yeah. Really wound him up because I thought if he's going to try and spoil a little bit for me, I'm going to wind him up. You can't tell me I'm going to save a frying pan for an old woman. Well, I'm going to wind you up now. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll ask you guys too, but I'll start by giving mine. The most insidious puzzle I ever played in a game. The one I will give you was from a game, an old PC game. I think it was called Ching. It was about the underground, that huge underground burial city, the one with the terracotta warriors. And in this game, you fall into it and you explore it. It was from a time period where everyone wanted to be missed. Now, of course, no one wants to be missed, but that's beside the point. Anyways, but there was this one puzzle where you were walking by a stream and you had to catch a fish. Have I told you guys this story?
No.
So you had to catch a fish. You go through all your inventory, and you can even put together in your inventory a fishing rod. You can take sticks and beat the water to try and knock a fish out. You had lots of inventory. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. So you know how you caught the fish in that game? If you waited 4 minutes, a fish would jump out. But every time you touched your mouse, pressed a key, or did anything, the timer restarted. So most people who passed that level, they got a phone call or they had to go to the bathroom,
Right. So they pass it accidentally.
Yeah.
That to me sounds really, really stupid because it's like, we'll give you the puzzle, but we won't even give you a hint at what the solution is.
Like I say, it's the most insidious puzzle I know. It wasn't a great selling game.
Worst puzzles. Okay. I mean, that might be why, right? Because perhaps none of the reviewers could get past that part.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it a bug, but I will say that it came out at a time where people were also moving away from missed games.
Yeah.
Sure.
That level of patience wasn't there.
Well, and when I think games, Myst is pretty far from what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, Myst is kind of like an interactive slideshow.
Yeah.
Right?
That's exactly what it is. And the other thing is that Myst came out at there are times where things benefit. They have momentum simply because they have momentum. Myst had been a big thing on Apple, on Macintosh. So it came out to PC, and people on PCs, which were much big, they wanted to join into the snobbishness of Apple. And games certainly looked better Myst certainly looked better than any game they'd ever seen before. But again, it was a slideshow. Those were some very pretty slides. By today's standards, of course, Myst looks pretty old. But in its day.
Yeah, you've got to remember the time it came out, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, I mean, it's like, here's a font of water. If I touch it just in the right place, the font fills up. It was so exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, those sort of hidden object puzzle games can be quite hard to play. But like you said, it is because it was built in slideshow software.
Yeah.
Right. That's why I said it's like an interactive slideshow. It quite literally was.
the gulf between a Myst and an adventure on Monkey Island they're pretty similar, but to this day, people playing Monkey Island games still have fun.
Yeah.
You know,
as long as you don't mention monkey combat to one. The less said about that, the better,
Well,
I think.
I think that's what makes people go back to them, right? Because of the fun element.
the fun element.
Because that's what Myst didn't capture. Myst has this, like you say, it looks gorgeous, and it was released specifically for one format originally. And then everyone who didn't have a Macintosh was saying, "Hey, I want to play this, but I don't want to spend $5,000 on a computer to play it, or whatever the value was, right?" And so so then when it came to PC compatible format, it was fighting against. Like you say, it was fighting against the Monkey Island games because they were fun to play, and that's the difference, right?
Can I just tell you one fun story from early in my career? And then I know I'm slowing you down. We'll have to get to the next story.
It's fine.
But just you'll like this story. You'll get a kick out of this story. And here I am, not only swallowing my boot this time, but I'm up to my thigh now. It was
I definitely got to hear this then.
It was early in my career. I was only writing for the Seattle Times. My editor at the tech section of the Seattle Times would give me lots of assignments, and then he'd wonder if anybody was actually reading my stuff. And it came to a point, this was very early in my career, where he said, "Look, I'm not sure anybody is reading this. Maybe it's time to stop doing these." And I said, "Well, if I can prove that a lot of people are reading my articles, can we keep going?" My vote. They were the only people I was writing for at that point. He's like, "Yeah, if you can get like a lot of people to write in, then yeah." So I wrote my next article, which included the sentence that the worst thing about Macintosh computers was the people who used them. He never questioned my readership ever again.
Is it a good time to mention that I've got a Macintosh computer?
Macs are
that's
great.
one way to get people to write in.
Yeah, Macs are great. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's really nothing wrong with people who use Macs either. But they were touchy. They're very proud to be Macintosh users. You make a comment like that, and 9 out of 10 times they'll hold up their laptop and say, "Oh, I've got a Macintosh computer." And so that was just a throwaway line that was guaranteed to make every Mac user in Seattle upset. And boy, howdy, it worked.
It's always a great way to find out whether someone's consuming your content to do that, right? There's this, it's a real thing that happens it used to happen in the UK. Lots of different cartographers would get together and draw maps, like the Ordnance Survey map of the UK, which is like where all the roads are, where all the houses are, things like church steeples and restaurants and things like that. Essentially Google Maps on paper, right? So, but what each company would do is they would invent things and add them to their own maps, things that weren't there.
Paper towns.
So you'd have like, oh, this is a church. Yeah, right, a paper town. Yeah, so it didn't exist, and then that way they would know if someone has copied their map. So they would buy all of their competitors' maps, and then check for the hidden things that weren't real. And it feels like it's a similar thing that you could do. I guess though with the printed word, you have, like you say, more chance of really upsetting someone. Okay, so we have a comment from MVG. Now this isn't MVG, Modern Vintage Gamer, who works for Night Dive Studios. This is my friend Matt Vikingod, and he's all about the NES. And so he said the NES had a weird streak of taking on a completely different game and slapping a Nintendo IP on it and calling it a sequel. So examples like Super Mario Bros. 2 over here, or The Legend of Zelda 2. So he's wondering, what are your thoughts on those sort of titles?
Doku Doku Panic, in my view, was a disaster. Link, Adventure of Link, what was it? It was just Link, wasn't it? I was not a
let's
huge
move
fan
over
of
to
that
the
one,
Adventures of Link.
especially because I had one of those cartridges that would forget that you passed the castle.
Yeah.
So, I can't tell you how many times I thought, okay, tomorrow I'm going to beat, the last castle, only to turn it on and find out that, nope, I've got to go back to this castle way over here, beat it all over again, and then make my way all the way back and fight the final battle. And that did not make me happy. I don't know that I ever finished that game because of that.
That makes sense.
That was so interesting because that was 89, I believe. No, it might have been 90 when they came out. 89 or 90. And I still remember walking into the store when people were still just saying that Super Mario 2 and a sequel to Zelda were coming out. And I walked into the store and there they were on the shelves. The store charged 10 extra bucks for the games, but you could have them right then and there. And boy, I had my money ready right away. And both games were disappointing. Really disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
The high point for me in sequels on the NES was probably Double Dragon 2.
Oh,
which
what a game.
I thought was a wonderful game.
Oh.
Really wonderful. Graphically gorgeous to look at. Challenging, but doable. Well, the very end was pretty darn challenging.
Yeah.
But great game. But yeah, it's ridiculous to take Doki Doki Panic and say this is the new Mario. Mario on a flying carpet doesn't work for me. And for that matter, Mario with a pressure washer didn't work for me either.
Yeah, that was a bit odd.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
But I suppose though that's what happens when you have a title like the original Super Mario Brothers 2 was deemed too difficult for Western audiences. So they were like, well, what do we do? I know. We'll take this really weird game that was produced for a radio station, do a palette swap and release that, right? But I suppose the good thing about Super Mario Brothers 2 over here in the West is it actually gave Nintendo the chance to have the world's first openly trans video game character. So Birdo is actually a trans creature. It actually says in the instruction manual, Birdo is male but but represents themselves as female. So I think that, but maybe that was just Nintendo of America going, hey, what if a kid could play dress up in this weird and wacky world? Maybe I'm attributing way too much to Nintendo.
You do know the story about Final Fight.
Oh, you can't leave us hanging. Come on.
Ooh.
So,
Yeah,
please.
So, they did Final Fight
is
was
this-
one of the launch games for the NES, Capcom. And
Is
they
this
got
the story
it,
of
Howard
Poison by
Lincoln-
chance? Sorry.
What?
I just had. Is this the story behind the character of Poison? By any
I'm
chance?
not sure. I don't know if I know the name, but so they got the game. It was a very good port of the arcade game, and then Howard Lincoln called the president of Capcom up. I think it was Morrissey at the time, and said, "Can you come on over?" And he came over and he said, "We can't run this game. We won't sell this game." And Morrissey said, "Why?" And he said, "Because there's no violence against women on Nintendo game platforms."
Right.
And so Morrissey said, "There's no violence against women in this game." And they started playing the game, and you don't have to go very far before this woman with the cap and the stockings comes out, and boom, 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 down she goes. And Morrissey, not missing a beat, said, "Oh, you mean the transvestite?"
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That character in later Street Fighter games, I think they were referred to as Poison, and there was a whole thing behind like what you just said. They represent themselves as female, but they're not. sort of thing. And in the fighting games, it is very clear that they think they're a female, but they're not actually a female. That's why I said, is this the Poison story? Because the character's called Poison.
Right,
I was really sorry to interrupt you there, but I kind of knew where this was going, because I've read a lot into that. I just got so fascinated by it, before.
That's a very interesting way to get around Nintendo's seal of approval.
Yeah, definitely.
And Nintendo let it be.
I like it.
Fair enough.
I like it. Interesting. Okay. So, friend of the show, Tyron, has said, I'd love to learn your thoughts on PC history too. A lot of the coverage on video games seems to be centered around consoles rather than PC titles, with the exception of World of Warcraft. So, what genres of PC games do you... what genres of games of PC... Okay, sorry, yeah. Let me try that again. So, what genres of PC games do you think that modern gaming have to thank for? So, like maybe FPSs or strategy games or any particular titles, right?
Originally the ultimate history of video games. To me, a video game is a console game, a portable game. I would now include mobile games and arcade games. PC and computer games were a separate thing to me. Originally, I was going to do a book. My first title thought was Electronic Playground, and I would do Electronic Playground for video games and Electronic Playground for PC games. What happened was somebody stole the, I think it was Electronic, anyways, somebody stole part of my title and I had to walk away from it. And then I found myself more interested in the history of consoles, because PC, not so much that PC wasn't interesting, it's fascinating, but it's sprawling. Whereas you can follow a narrative, you can follow the 2000s by looking at Sony, Sega, Nintendo. You couldn't do that, or the 90s at least. You couldn't do that with PC. It would be a very, very difficult book to write and to narrate. But it's fascinating. It's incredibly fascinating. Obviously, FPS came out of PCs, and really fairly early on. Although you can make a very strong argument that before there was FPS on PC, before there was Doom or the original Castle Wolfenstein, there was Night Driver on the Atari arcade game, which was first person. Certainly, Red Baron and Battle. What is it? I want to say Battlefront, but it's not Battlefront. The Atari tank game.
Battle Tanks. Is it Battle Tanks?
Battlezone?
No, it's not Battle Tanks. It's Battle... Oh, I can't believe I'm not... Oh, this is... Battle... anyways, so... Battlezone.
Question mark, right?
Battlezone. Yes.
So both of those were FPS. They simply took out the turret from Battlezone and the dual machine guns from Red Baron, and now you were running. You weren't in a vehicle, but those were first person perspective, nonetheless. So you could make an argument that that Carmack and Looking Glass stole from the arcade and then improved and reformed, but at that point I don't think it's fair or true. But my point is FPS came from PC and went. People don't like to admit it, but Madden NFL was a PC game long before it went to console.
Yeah.
It used to be that there was this great division because when you played a PC game, you were generally at a desk, which meant you had a mouse, and you could do very fine movements with a mouse. Whereas if you were playing a console game, you had a controller, and the controller was better for broad movements. And so my favorite genre from the PC, I'm going to show how very old I am, was RTS games. I just adore RTS games. that they never translate well to console because you really wanted a mouse to be able to control them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
does
that answer the question?
That makes sense, right? You look at, yeah, I think it does.
Okay.
I think it does, and I think you raise a really good point about RTSs on consoles, because if you take like a Command and Conquer, you quite literally have to use that fine motor movement of select, draw a box around the units you want to move to where the units are going to move, and then tell them to move there. That's all fine motor control.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, yeah, I can draw a box with a PlayStation controller or an N64 controller, but it's not going to be as good. As I won't have as much control over the size of that box, the position of that box, as I would on a PC. And because of that, it will be a bit clunky me moving whatever pointer I'm using to that position. And because of that, it could be that you end up sending the units off in the wrong direction. And because of that, the game then slows down. Or rather, it feels like it speeds up and it gets more frantic because you've sent them in the wrong direction accidentally, right?
What was the Atari arcade game where you had the cannons and you were... it was like an RTS almost. And between rounds, you'd build your walls around your castle. And it's once you couldn't seal your castle, that's when you lost. Refer to a wall, the name of the game.
I'm drawing a blank. I think I know what you're on about, but I'm drawing a blank completely.
I can't believe I own that game. I used to play it with my kids all the time. And I always remember, once you'd fought lots of battles, they'd come out for the last one. They'd say, "Final battle." And, it was a great game. I can't believe I'm forgetting it. It was, the name of it was such a good game.
I'm going to look it up.
And they tried Rampart. Rampart.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Rampart.
Yes.
And they did import it to NES and Super NES, and I think Genesis too. But again, still hard to play with. And that one was such a watered down version of RTS.
The one and only RTS game I could ever play, and I've tried tons of them over the years, and I just can't do them. The one and only RTS game I could ever play was on a console, and it was Command and Conquer for the Sega Saturn. The only game I actually completed.
You could play
obviously
that?
Both sides. I could, and I completed both campaigns with a pad. And as far as I'm concerned, I've peaked. I don't need to play any other RTS because Command and Conquer with a pad was difficult enough.
Like I said,
did you ever try it on PC though?
I never got round to it. I played some of the further installments, so like Tiberian Sun. There was a couple of Red Alerts I played like Command and Conquer 3 when that came out. I dabbled a bit in generals, but I don't know what it was. It was the clunky movement and the like half an hour pitch battle with the pad made it for me. The being too precise and being exactly where it needs to be, it wasn't, to me, that wasn't Command and Conquer. It had to be on a pad. It had to be like a pitch battle just to try and get stuff working. But I did manage to complete both discs, on the Saturn, and it took me a long time, but I managed it. And the thing is, I haven't touched an RTS since, and I think that's why. Can't. Nah.
It's like I said earlier on, you're willing to go through punishment for your entertainment, right?
Yes, I'm glutton for punishment sometimes when I want to be.
Fair enough. Excellent. Okay. Well, I guess the I'm looking at our community comments, and the last one is about VR.
Well, no.
So,
there's one more that I'd like to ask if we've got time.
Yeah, go on.
It's a bit of a hot topic.
I mean, I have the time. Do you have the time?
Do you have the
Yeah,
time?
I'm fine. I've got
Okay.
another 20 minutes if we need it.
Okay, so it's a bit of a hot topic depending on who you talk to, and I always get different answers no matter who I ask. It's one of those really good questions. A lot of things get taken into consideration when I ask this question, so I'll just ask it and see how you go from there. Do you think games are easier now or do you think it's back in the day the hardware wasn't up to the level that we've got now? So do you think the older games were harder, or is it the newer games are easier? It's a bit of a hot topic, this one.
That question is a wonderful question. What I'm going to say, though, is that they've become harder and easier in different ways. So if you were playing, a Pac-Man, you didn't have to worry about a single button playing Pac-Man. And ignoring that there were patterns. If you didn't know the patterns, it was all simply based on reflex. And there was a certain amount of luck. You brought up earlier what really was Super Mario Brothers 2. You'd run to the cliff, you'd jump, and then there'd be a wind that would come randomly, and you'd fall to your death even if you timed the jump perfectly. It was so random. It was so arbitrary. The old games required an incredible amount of reflex on a certain level, but you didn't have to worry about other extra buttons. I can play a game of Ms. Pac-Man, especially Ms. Pac-Man on speed, and last a pretty long time because I'm used to not looking at buttons. But all of a sudden you give me buttons and I have to start worrying about finger dexterity. And this new generation has grown up. When Defender came out, people looked at Defender and they said, this is impossible. There are 4 buttons on it. People looked at Robotron. Eugene Jarvis, who created them both, will tell you that his whole point with Robotron was that most people couldn't pat their heads and rub their stomachs at the same time. Well, this new generation has a lot more ability to coordinate at different tasks at the same time. And so I think in some ways for them, these new games are a little easier, actually. They can last longer. These kids can pick up and play Call of Duty on their keyboard and mouse. My generation, we don't even think about it. We just look at it and move along. It's not that it's too hard for us, it's that it's impossible. And yet I think that some of these kids who can do those things run out of patience for the challenges of some of the new games as well. So for me, I will tell you that I can't imagine, some of these games are so impossibly hard, the new games, that I can't even, imagine how they do it, especially when it's, remember all these keys on your keyboard. I got to watch the Korean champion play StarCraft against the Canadian ones. And I was a guest of the nation of Korea at that point. And so they had me stand right behind him. And I could see the Korean champion, and he was such a machine. He knew every button. He had everything mapped out almost instantly, so the hotkeys and things. And it was unbelievable to me to watch that.
It's an experience watching it, and it just, you think they can't move that fast. The hands don't move, but things are happening, and it's just blare. It's just a blare. But I've watched some of it, and it's just how.
Yeah, I can move my hands that quickly, but you want me to choose which button I'm supposed to press while I'm doing that? Not a chance. I mean, I can pretend like I'm a master pianist, But wait, you want me to do it on an actual keyboard, playing actual music? Never mind.
Great thing to say there, Stephen, is if somebody says you're not playing the correct notes, it's a really old British stand-up joke. You say, I'm playing the correct notes, just not necessarily in the correct order. That's what you say. But I think to your point there about the slightly older games, right? The more retro games, the earlier titles, they were taking this idea of an arcade machine and bringing it into the home, right? And arcade games, no matter how you look at them, an arcade cabinet game is designed so you put a quarter in, you get 10 to 15 minutes, if that, of entertainment. Then you got to put another quarter in, because if you put one quarter in and get 5 hours of gameplay, it's not going to make any money, is it?
They actually want that to be 10 to 15 seconds, not 10 to 15 minutes. They want you to die quickly. Those games are made so that you would have a lot of fun, you would die quickly, you would see what you did wrong, and you would think, I won't make that mistake again. You know, I had a good friend named Fred Watson. He's not going to be listening. He's in Hawaii, unfortunately. I wish Fred could hear this because he would love to be invoked, or he'd get a kick out of it. He's been invoked. But he knew the patterns to Star Wars Arcade. You know, that wonderful Star Wars, Vexar game. Or Vector game. He knew all the patterns. So we went to an arcade once. We got $10 worth of quarters. He took 2 quarters and left me with $9.50 worth. And went down and started playing Star Wars. And not all that long later, I was standing in the group watching him play Star Wars because I'd run out of quarters by then already. And maybe 15 or 20 minutes after that, I just left the arcade because I was bored watching. I didn't want to keep on watching all night. Guess which one of us, the arcade owner, was happy to see the following day, right?
I've got a similar thing with, I don't play it as much now, but I've got a similar thing with the original House of the Dead arcade unit. I played a lot of it on the Saturn back in the day, and I had one of those third-party light guns, you know, that would occasionally sync up to the screen, and you wouldn't have to shoot off-screen to hit targets and what have you. And I played that much of it that I remember one time me and Jay went to the seaside, and that's where classically in the UK as well the arcade machines are, you know, to pump your money into. And I had 1 credit, and House of the Dead has got 4 stages and then a boss battle, like your gauntlet. And I got, on 1 credit, I got to halfway through the boss gauntlet at the end. Then it hit me, and I just went, "Oh, okay, that'll do." And you put your initials in to the high score, and then you walk away. I have no idea how he stood and watched me, because it must have been boring. Because of how much I memorized everything, especially on the Saturn. It was never the same way twice. So I memorized everything, and I just had a light gun in my hand, and I got all the way to the end. And I went, "Yeah, okay, fair enough." I put the gun down. I don't know how he continued watching, because I was just stood there for a good, it must have been about 25 minutes to get to the end. And I was like, I'm not putting any more money in. That'll do. So I don't know how he stood there. I didn't draw a crowd. It was one of those bang bang shooty. Oh, he's playing that, not realizing that I was stood there. You know, this toy gun in my hand, firm grip, sweaty palms, just thinking, I'm gonna do this. You know. So I don't know how he did it. I really don't.
I tell you how I did it. Our mum sent us out to the arcades. I had to look after it.
Yeah, that is a point.
That's what it was.
It must have been weird seeing a short kid with a light gun in his hand stay there for 25 minutes, shooting anything he sees. It must have been a sight.
My wife, a beautiful tiny woman, a very beautiful woman, and intelligent, used to babysit at a home that had a Space Invaders game. So she's one of those people who can play Space Invaders until she gets bored. You know, those guys are never going to get her, or at least back then when we were dating. It's been 30 years now, but back then when we were dating, the invaders were never going to get her. They would never come all that close. She just, yeah. Well, I think I made the mistake of playing her once.
I mean, you make that mistake once, don't you?
Yeah.
Just the once.
Excellent. Well, what I'll say, Stephen, I know that we're running out
No,
of
if
time.
you got one more question, let's get it
today.
done.
Well, okay, so the last question was essentially, what are your thoughts on the future of VR, right? We kind of hinted at that towards the beginning, didn't we? Here we said that VR is kind of in its infancy and it still needs some sort of external stuff.
And that augmented reality is really
what's sort of build it up.
Where things are going. Yeah, I stand by that.
Yep, and that makes sense, right? Okay, so like I said, Stephen, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you again today. I had a load of fun, and if you'll forgive me, please do forgive me for getting the title of the book wrong. I think I got it wrong about 15
Don't even
times.
worry about it.
But definitely, if you are watching or listening to this, because we're going to release a video and an audio version of it, and you haven't read Stephen's books, definitely go check them out. Because if you are interested in how we got from the early 70s all the way up to now in video gaming, you're gonna have a wonderful time reading them. And even if you're not really that interested in video gaming anyway, but you're interested in history of entrepreneurship, you'll also gain a lot of insight into like popular culture as well. So whoever you are, I'm sure that these books are applicable to you. So definitely go and check those out.
Well, it's one of those things you don't know where you are until you know where you've been. You know, greater understanding,
exactly
you'll have a greater appreciation for what you've got now if you know where it came from, you know, and the struggles and all that. So definitely worth going out and reading it,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely check out Stephen's books. Stephen, thank you ever so much for spending some time with us again today. I know that it's really early in your morning and you have, I'm guessing, an incredibly exciting afternoon planned, and you've been talking to us all this time. So hopefully you can go and do your exciting things.
Thanks, guys.
It's been a blast.
Thank you very much.